Welcome to this inaugural episode of CJ Adrien's Critical Thinking Lab. I'm your host, CJ Adrien, which I guess is in the title. And today I'm going to cover the who, the what, the where, the why, and the how of this channel. So first, the who. Who am I? Well, I'm best known as a historical novelist, bestseller, award winner for my Hastings series, which you can see behind me. I'm also a published historian and a former, and I guess current school teacher. I used to teach school, and then I went into the private sector where I made a whole lot more money than teaching. And then I was invited recently, after decades of still keeping one foot in academia, to teach for medievalist.net. So that still keeps me in the teacher realm, I suppose. So why this channel? Why now? Well, since I left teaching about 10 years ago, I've continued to have that itch. I love the classroom. I love engaging with students. And I also see all the changes happening in the world and all the negative news happening online. And I just know that there's got to be something that I can offer folks to help prepare them, especially young people, for the world they're about to embark in. Especially since the internet used to be full of nonsense by human idiots, and now it's going to be full of nonsense by AI idiots. And as a school teacher, I have this mission in life to help prepare people to avoid falling into the trap of propaganda, falling into the trap of misinformation, of fake news. And so that's why I call this the Critical Thinking Lab, because using history as my vector to teach critical thinking skills, I am hoping that I can help some folks better understand how to question things, how to think critically, and how to wade through what Arnold Schwarzenegger would call the bullshit. So here we go. In this inaugural episode, I'm going to share with you a quick little anecdote. I want to keep these videos short so that they're punchy, to the point, something like that. So our first order of business is to define what critical thinking is. Now I have a computer in front of me, so please forgive my eyes kind of drifting away, but I'm going to keep looking back at you. And if you type in critical thinking definition, the first thing that comes up now is the, unfortunately, AI-generated prompt, which tells me critical thinking is the objective analysis and evaluation of an issue in order to form a judgment. I would like to get a second opinion, because part of critical thinking is not taking things at face value. If someone tells you one thing, it's always good to trust, but verify. Thank you, Ronald Reagan, who was before my time. See, I'm not aging myself already. All right, let's take a look. Merriam-Webster has critical thinking, the act or practice of thinking critically, as by applying reason and questioning assumptions in order to solve problems, evaluate information, discern biases, etc. Let's do the Cambridge Dictionary. Oh, Cambridge, they must have something quite excellent. Cambridge University says the process of thinking carefully about a subject or idea without allowing feelings, opinions to affect you. Okay, there's three. Who's right? And herein lies the critical juncture of critical thinking. The way that I was taught is that critical thinking is the process of questioning things until you can arrive at as an objective of a truth as you can possibly arrive to as a subjective being. So all three of these definitions are technically correct if you put it in those terms, taking your own biases as much as you possibly can out of the equation as you're questioning things so that you can look at things from various angles and arrive at as objective of a truth as you possibly can. Now, there are a lot of influencers out there that teach science. They say science teaches you critical thinking skills. The problem with science, and I don't want to say anything bad about science because I love science, and I will be talking about scientific principles here on this channel. But the challenge with science is that there is actually an objective truth to arrive to. It's like Neil deGrasse Tyson says, we don't use our senses to come to conclusions in science anymore. We have measuring systems and things outside of the human that can actually tell us what is objectively true. And from a critical thinking standpoint, that means there's an end point versus my field, which is history. And this is where it gets interesting, because in history, oftentimes there is no objective truth. In fact, history oftentimes is like taking a puzzle and trying to put it together with only half the pieces. And so you end up going around and around, looking at things from different angles, thinking critically in different ways about a certain topic in order to arrive at the most plausible truth that you can possibly formulate from the information that you have. That's what makes history so interesting. And what's even more interesting is the farther back you go, the harder it gets, so the harder you have to think. And in fact, there's a wonderful subject that my co-host of the Vikingology podcast, Terry, and I liked to essentially run around in circles, or as Terry likes to call it, mental masturbation, which is to constantly look at the same topic of What caused the Viking Age, which is essentially an unanswerable question based on the evidence that we have, which is practically none. So we just keep going in circles. Well, was it an influx of Islamic silver? Was it a youth bulge? Was it political problems? Was it technological advancements? Did they just make ships and decide, let's go raid somebody? But what we're also doing at the same time is exercising that part of our brain that leads us to be good critical thinkers, insofar as we question everything. We evaluate our own biases. In fact, in that same podcast, I had some of my biases challenged in a couple of episodes, and it was great. It is an illumination. And most people don't like to have their biases challenged. But as a critical thinker, you should. You should want that. That should be a goal where you can expose your biases so you can understand yourself better and how you view the world, and also so you can come to better conclusions. So, now that we got the critical thinking piece out of the way, I was doing a little bit of research for a course I'm going to teach early next year on early Brittany. For the course, I have 2 books by a well-respected historian, Jean-Christophe Gassard, that are general histories and generally light on information. So I like to use them as a starting point for the structure of the lectures I'm going to give. There's 6 lectures in the whole series of the course. But going through his book, I read a couple of passages that made me raise an eyebrow because, well, number 1, I know better, and number 2, the things that I discovered seemed to me a little bit odd. The first one was a description from the Annales of Saint-Bertin about the death of Erespoe, the alleged first king of Brittany. Now, if you don't know where Brittany is, hang on, let's back up a little bit. So Brittany, la Bretagne, is a peninsula that juts out into the Atlantic from France. I call it the arm that goes into the ocean. I live in the Nantes region, which is what I like to call the Armpit of France. The Loire River passes through and then goes out into the ocean right at the crease. I call it the Armpit Sweat of France. And my family is actually from a small island called Noirmoutier, which is south of the mouth of the Loire, that looks like a little hair on the map. And so I say my family's from the Armpit hair of France. Putting that aside, I have a whole lot of information and decades of research on the medieval history of this area. And so Erespoe, the alleged first king of Brittany, we're talking about the middle of the 9th century, was murdered by his cousin Salomon. What triggered my questioning was the quote that he took from the Annales of Saint-Bertin, which tends to be quite dry and devoid of any spectacular details. And the quote that he put in here said that the Annales d'Angoulême described the murder as terrifying, dragging the man out to the altar and beheading him. And I had to really think about that one because I thought, seems a bit dramatic for the authors of the Annals, which is why it's a good thing I have it on my shelf. And so I went to the book and I opened it to the entry for that year, looking for this devilish description of the murder of Erespoe. And what did I find? There it is. And then Solomon killed Erespoe. Frustrated, I looked in the bibliography. Maybe he's pulling from another source. But if I go back to the page, he obviously said, this is a direct quote from the Annales de Saint-Bertin. How could it be that such a respected historian could have made such a terrible error? In fact, it made me a little angry because it was the sort of fabrication I expect from ChatGPT. A hallucination, if you will, only to realize that we are all human. We all make mistakes. We are all prone to confabulation. And this is where critical thinking is really important because no matter who tells you what, you must always question it and verify. Even the best of us can make mistakes or straight up make stuff up. So now it calls into question the entire veracity of these books that I'm using, which I know for the most part what he says is fine. But that one mistake is pretty critical. And had I not caught it, I could have found myself making a silly mistake in front of my students. It's important to stay vigilant as you access information, no matter where it comes from, whether it's the internet, a physical book, from a random person who believes in a flat earth, or from an award-winning historian. It's always good to trust, but verify. I think that's good for an inaugural episode. You will get to know me as I make more episodes about random parts of history, typically medieval history, as we'll start. I'll also warn you that some of my content may go off into the paranormal because critical thinking is one thing, but also the misapplication of critical thinking can be just as detrimental as not exercising it at all. And what I mean by that is conspiracy theorists. They are very good at questioning everything and at asking a lot of questions. The problem is it's so infused with biases and is leading towards such an obvious end goal that it is the antithesis of critical thinking, is the anti-critical thinking. And so I will occasionally deviate from history to go into dubious science, conspiracy theories, and my favorite, aliens. Okay, that's it for me. I will see you at the next episode, which will be about the 100 Years' War.